But let's get started here. First of all, we have a couple of guests today. The main guest is Mr. Jim Petro, who's dialed in from all the way out west and near Reno. So welcome, Jim. Jim's going to be presenting here in a minute. And of course, we also have a semi-regular Bruce McCowan, who's going to be presenting at our meeting next Saturday. Some more work on his freight cars and open top loads. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, a reminder that our general meeting is next Saturday, same time, same place at 2 o'clock virtually. And some fun news. I think you'll find it interesting and good. We'll be doing the Silver Spike presentation at the general meeting next week, towards the beginning of the meeting, so don't show up late. We'll have a nice video of the presentation that we put together. A couple of other quick things. A gathering on December 12th, but we're going to have Mr. Steve Lasher doing a second signal presentation. Right, Steve? You just joined us?
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Yep.
And then Mr. Russ Weiss will be, you're doing the freight house, right, Mr. Weiss?
Yeah. Correct.
Russ will be talking about his rebuild of his freight house, which is it's a thing of beauty. And then last but not least, don't forget our monthly modeling contest. Deadline is today for dioramas. And also don't forget our special December modeling contest, which doesn't count against the contest points and awards. It's just a contest for fun. Do a Christmas engine, car, or structure of some kind, or diorama, anything Christmas related, and at the same time model railroad related. So with that said, we'll move, unless we have any other comments before we go. We're going to meet everybody, and then we're going to highlight Mr. Petro.
Okay, well, guys, welcome to Northern Nevada, my Rio Grande railroad here. It's been here about 15 years. I've done most of the work. There's a few guys have done little detail stuff here and there. I don't know how long it is. It's code 70 and about half fast track switches. It represents the era of Colorado from Pueblo to Denver and on to Salt Lake City. There's a lot of gaps that aren't there, but that's okay. We'll deal with them. There's three 6-track staging loops and then several other staging opportunities here and there. And when we get back to where we can do op sessions again, we usually have about 15 people, and we have a dispatcher. And the first part of the layout is ABS signal. The rest is CTC. The CTC can go into ABS mode, and we can run stuff without having a dispatcher. And seems to be a pretty popular place. So anything else I missed here? I guess not. We're going to start out at the Pueblo staging area. When you first come into the room, this is what you see. Inside of this area right here is the Denver area. So now we're going to go down to where the staging from Pueblo comes out. And this is the town of Maniqua. There was a big steel mill there. And beyond that, most everything here is fantasy. This is a big, long peninsula, and there's a job that comes out of Denver and goes and works all these little towns and then turns around and works the towns on the way back. And it's a very, very popular job on my layout. Ooh. And it's the town of Palmer Lake. I'd like to take credit for painting this backdrop, but somebody else did it. It's pretty cool. And now we've come to the town of Castle Rock. That big rock structure there is actually a copy of something that was there where the town got its name from. I got 2 trains running here. Nobody's watching them. I hope this all works out well. Scratch belt trestled over the river here. And the old Rick's Bridge. And a big fill with a passing siding on it. And that's the Royal Gorge going to Colorado Springs in westbound. It did have some Burlington interchange cars on it that went from Denver down there. Right here we have a junction. There's South Denver Junction, and this bridge goes to a staging off to the left. Generally, that's not there. And I did forget to say this. This part of the railroad is called the Joint Line, and it was actually 2 different. Camera failure. Was 2 different railroads. It was the Rio Grande and the Santa Fe. And in World War I, the FRA says, we want you to operate this as a joint thing. And after the war, both railroads said, this is a pretty good deal. We're going to keep doing it. So this is in effect a double track main line, but there's 2 definite different tracks. And right here, this did actually divert here and go to the Santa Fe Rice Yard. Got some jiggling on my phone here. I don't quite understand. Okay, beyond there, we come into Denver. And there's a number of things here that are in sequence in reality with Denver. Nothing is nothing really much looks like what the prototype did. Beyond that, we came to 7th Street Yard, and it's busy all day long. Has a big tail track that goes off around the buildings there. And I have the electric uncouplers on here that came from a Make 'em Work Better article. They're Katie's, but have improved. I don't know if you can see that coupler move right there or not, but anyhow, they move, they hold in position for about 5 seconds and then release. Damn. I don't know what to say about this phone jiggling here. There we go. Anyhow, so when you're switching here, if you get the routine down, you can back up a train to it, push the uncoupler and hit reverse, and it drops it there very well. On down to the other end here, we do have we can work this yard from the other side. This is a big produce terminal called the Wazee Market that again did exist, and this is a pretty accurate scratch built version of it, although it was obviously he's made it quite bigger than this. As we come around the corner here, we enter Denver Station. On the right is the post office. I'm not real happy with that. That doesn't look anyway anything like it should, and I may rebuild it. On over to the station here. This station was produced by some professional model making place, and, and they couldn't sell this as a kit, but they said, we can sell you all the parts if you want, and it's layered acrylic, and I'm really, really happy with it. The Denver station did not have any through trains, so everything stopped here and turned around, and so we do that and run baggage cars over to REA and RPOs to the post office. This is the Express building, and that was scratch built. And Tipton, if you're there, Don Hanley built this building. This was a dairy and all, and it still exists, but you know, it is of course 5 times as big, and it's now a condo. Coming out of the yard, we have a Y here, and that did exist. That trains coming in from the east would back into this Y, and then back into the station. That's a mid-level staging here, and it represents trains that go to the east. From here, we have a large switching area called Commerce City. Again, none of these buildings are correct, but there was such a place. We have a local transfer runs that come over to here, pick up cars, and take cars back to the yard. This cut that's sitting here right now has just been delivered here and needs to be switched. There's usually 2 guys that stay busy in this area most all day long. We usually operate for about 5 hours. From here, we're entering westbound out of Denver up the hill to Moffett Tunnel. This, excuse me, I'm ducking under the bridge again here. This is just a fairly short tunnel. And end of scenery. Have a microengineering a bridge trestle here. Two sidings to go into Moffett Tunnel, which is correct. After you enter this tunnel, you will come back out up here to enter the upper level. And rather than a helix, this is a big long loop underneath there, and there are there are 2 staging tracks that we have in here that you can't, when they go into, after they go in the tunnel, you can't see them at all. And after that, we come out to the area called Rifle. Was a little small town there and a passing siding. After that, we get to Pierce Mine, which is back down that down there. There's a passing siding, and it is worked by this little switcher that belongs to the mine. That I think is really a cool little thing. I was able to put, it's a Bachman thing, but I was able to put sound and DCC and sound in it. After that, we cross over into Grand Junction. Numerous industries here. And I'm ducking under the bridge again. And this has another staging area here, a hole in the wall that goes to the town of Montrose, and there's a Montrose local that comes from there in the morning and drops off cars and then waits all day and then returns. It's only a track that's about 10 feet long or something. From there, we go into another staging that's represented Salt Lake City. And all these stagings are stacked on top of one another. We'll go in there in a moment. If you've been to Russ's house, this is going to be familiar with you, but this is what the control panel and the TV screen has. It shows you what's going on in the stagings. Oh, and into here we have our dispatcher room and the dispatcher panel and our 3 levels of stagings. We do have a schedule for the passenger trains and a few of the freights that we run. And oh yeah, we use a fast clock on this. I think that's about what I got. Anybody got anything? Is somebody else is coming on next though?
Yeah, we have 2 more. We have 2 more presenters. Next up, speaking of that, we have Kevin Jones, Kevin models an ON30. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right, so I've been dabbling in ON30 the last few years, and if you're not aware what that is, that's basically O-scale trains that run on HO width track. It basically represents narrow gauge prototypes, but it's not quite 3 foot gauge and not quite 2 foot gauge. It's somewhere in between those two. So a lot of the stuff is freelanced. And I've been working on building some freelance hoppers out of a MDC gravel hoppers. And these MDC gravel hoppers, if you've seen them before, Athearn bought all the MDC stuff some years ago, and I believe this is one of the few cars that have not reappeared. It's kind of a good candidate for upscaling to O scale because it's a very heavy car. It's built almost a steampunk kind of look. The plates and stuff and widths and things in it are kind of overscale for HO for what it represents. So, these cars are out there individually floating around. There's also 3 packs in the Kitbash series. I've seen some stuff on eBay where the underframes on these were originally metal, and that'll be important later. And there's these crazy instructions for making operating hopper doors on it, which I don't think would ever actually work long term. I think the first time I used them, they snap off. So I had no qualms about trying to make that work. And you can see here, this is probably the easiest way, the best way to acquire them. They came in 3 packs, completely undecorated. And it was meant as basically a kit basher series. You were supposed to cut the middle of them out and make these ore cars you can see in the picture here with them. So what comes in the kit? So basically the kit consists of several components. You've got the underframe here, and then you've got the hopper body that goes on top of that, and it actually screws together. So I think that's a legacy left over here from when this piece here used to be cast metal at some point. There's the sides, and then there's the hopper doors, some wheels that are supposed to open the gate on the side, the coupler cover, and then all this rest of this levers and things were meant for the operating door mechanism, which I didn't even try to attempt to implement. So the possibility to make this ON30. So the dimensions in O scale of this car, it's about 5.5 feet over the ribs. The height's about 3 to 3.5 feet on the car body. The length is 20 foot 7 inches over the car body. So the length is good. The height and width are a little undersized for small narrow gauge equipment. So we're going to try to make it wider. Target gets 6 feet. make it taller, and then we just want to make it look beefier, more like the structural members are larger and would be something that would hold something heavier. And what I found with this car was that the evergreen channel will fit over the existing ribs, just like this. So what I could do is I could take a piece of evergreen channel, flip it over, and then spin it over the top of the existing rib. So basically that took the ribs in O scale, which were about only an inch and a half thick, nearly doubled their size and nearly doubled the width, giving them a much more beefier look. So basically this was kind of my first pass. So in addition to the ribs I beefed up, I also added a foot of height in O scale. It's 0.25 all the way around the edge, which also gave it some more height and made it look a little beefier there as well. So here's another view of that first pass from the side. And some issues with that first pass is that it rode way too high on the trucks. The couplers wouldn't line up. It just looked like it was suspended up in air. I need to add some rivets to these things. We need to put a top cord on the top. Then I post this back to the ON30 Railroading Facebook group, which has about 6,000 members to it, and got some positive feedback, so I thought I'd continue on with this project. So to add rivets, I think I've talked this back into place, but I've managed to turn my Cricut Explorer craft cutter into a rivet machine. So basically what I've done is I've replaced the blade with a scriber, a carbide scribing tip, and then I had to do some work with the mats. One of the things I found with trying to do rivets with the Cricut was that you needed the mat to deflect so that you actually get a rivet head that was round on the back. And I found that neoprene rubber was the ideal way to do that. And then when you start punching a bunch of friggin' rivets in styrene, it wants to curl up. So I had to find something to hold the styrene down to keep it from curling, but also allow me to remove it. And I found this Aleene's Tack It Over and Over, which is a repositional adhesive that's really, really sticky. So how that works is the tool I created is basically this scriber point inside a 3D printed holder that replaces the blade holder. There's a magnet that holds it into this screw on the end, and the screw allows me to adjust the pressure, the length of the point to allow me to get bigger or smaller rivets. Then as far as the mat, I'm using the Strong Grip mat. We're using a little 32" neoprene rubber sheet, and then we cover it with Aleene's Tack It Over and Over and let that set up. And it goes from being white to almost clear. It's more of a yellow, you'll see here in a minute. Then on top of that, we added some .010 styrene and blue painter's tape to hold all this thing down. So here you see it loaded in the machine. And then when it's done, you wind up with these rivets, which may or may not look like rivets. You're actually looking at the top side, and these are the indentations. I know it's kind of an optical illusion. It's been driving me crazy while I've been doing this, but these are actually the divots, not the rivets. The rivets are sticking through on the back side of this. And then when you're done, you get this nice riveted panel here with all these rounded rivets here. And this tack adhesive will come off with some isopropyl alcohol. If it gets on there, it will dissolve it. So that's how I managed to create all these rivets. So I don't have a lot of under construction photos of the first one because I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a presentation on it. So here we are with all the rivets in place. We added basically a piece of .01 styrene with the rivets in it over all these cross members to give it more beef and give it a nice riveted look. In addition, here's that top cord I added. It's out of .020 styrene strips around the outside. Now, the next problem I ran into is, weight. The car turned out to be really, really light, like less than 2 ounces. So I had to find somewhere to shove some weight in this car. And unfortunately, it would have been a lot easier to do before I glued it all together. So I was managed on this prototype to actually get a piece of styrene across it, sliding it in from the side vertically here. And then was able to add these panels on the end to create a cavity to shove full of weight. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to quite get enough weight in there what I usually use, so I had to use something exotic, tungsten shot. And this picture here kind of gives you a scale of what, its density is. So of all these materials that I have available to use for weight, the tungsten shot is the most dense. I can get about 60%, less, takes up 60% less volume, or 40% less volume than what number 9 lead shot it takes up. So it's really, really handy for shoving weight in every possible cavity you can get. Unfortunately, it's incredibly expensive. I finally found a US supplier, because most of the suppliers are from China. I finally found a US supplier that sells this as a replacement birdshot for reloading shotgun shells. I bought 5 pounds of it, and that was over $200. Then I had to put stirrup steps on this guy. And to me, stirrup steps are the biggest headache I ever have. I seem to be breaking these things off of everything. So they're one of the last things I put on the car. I find they're very vulnerable. And like I said, I always seem to break them off. I love the Tichy O-scale steps, but they're made of ABS. And it's hard to get, they're very durable, but it's hard to get a bond between ABS and styrene via a solvent weld. They just don't melt at the same rate. It's really hard to get those to glue together for me to a good solid joint. Metal would be stronger, but you're still going to wind up having to glue it on there with super glue or something to keep from knocking it off. So I wound up making some simple 3D printed steps out of high impact polystyrene hips, which welds, solvent welds extremely good to this car since it's made of styrene as well. So, the steps were extremely simple. It is just, here's my 3D design. Whoops, went too far. It's just a continuous ribbon. There it is off of my one of my 3D printers here at home. There's how they come out. So basically you just cut it in the smaller section here and clean it up. And there you got a nice stirrup set, the solvent weld in there. So the other detail I did is, we put some grab irons on the corners. So our little O-scale guys will have something to hold on to. And then we add a brake platform to kind of represent that there is some parking brake system on here. And this is just a little box built out of 0.020 styrene. It's basically a scale foot wide and a scale foot tall. And these are just Grant line detail parts, the wheel and the ratchet, and that's some 0.020 phosphorus bronze wire. Then the last thing was the gate wheels. The kit includes 4 gate wheels. Now, unfortunately, since I had made the ribs now all taller, that means the wheel wouldn't fit on the side of the car where it was supposed to. So I had to add a little 0.040 spacer in here to make it offset. Also added this nut bolt washer casting to the end that made it a little more detailed, give it some reason to hold on to the car. So there's the final prototype. It hasn't been painted yet. Just a little walk around of it. Yeah, unfortunately, after taking pictures, you discover, it wasn't really on the track. And this one, I've included this, including this little O-scale guy here for scale. So he's right on at the top of his hat. He's a little over 6 feet tall on the top of his hat. So we managed to get the hopper up to over 6 feet tall on its trucks. And, it looks pretty good scale, pretty hefty for an O-scale car now. So now I need to make a bunch of these. So as you can see, I've accumulated quite a few of these kits. You can see those boxes of larger boxes contain 3 each. So that's at least 12 there. And there's at least another 5 in the plastic baggie at the end. So eventually I've got, roughly over 15, possibly 20 of these cars to convert. And the way I did it the first time, I think I spent 2 or 3 months on it, and that's not going to work for each car. So obviously to make this work, I'm not going to do as much scratch building. I'm going to speed up my assembly by using 3D printed parts. I'm going to do a better job of adding weight in advance before I start putting it together. We're going to make the assembly sequence so it makes sense. And the only drawback here is the 3D print. Using the 3D printed parts, I'll have to attach most of the parts with super glue instead of solvent welding, which, you know, for me slows things down a little bit because styrene to styrene solvent welding is just beautiful. It goes real quick, and the super glue not quite as fast. So what am I 3D printing? So the ribs with the rivets are going to get 3D printed. The caps that go on the diagonal braces will be 3D printed. The little brake platform will be 3D printed. The gate wheel little spacers will be 3D printed, and the stirrup strap steps, I'm going to do the same steps I did on the original prototype. I was going to have everything printed shapeways, but it's expensive to do that. And the first batch I did not come out correctly. So I was decided that probably wasn't going to be cost effective. It turns out I've had a resin printer, 3D printer here at home. I've used very little. I've been working a little more with it and found this eSun water washable resin that made the process of printing much cleaner and easier and produced some really nice detail. So the shapeways parts, the problems I have with the shapeways parts was that, you know, these rivet strips on the ends here, what I got was half a rivet and some square piece sticking up here. So all these ribs were, you know, that got printed like that were pretty much useless. So that kind of turned me off of, you know, having to have shapeways reprint these over and over again because they kept getting messed up. Now back to the printer I'm using, you know, the black monolith here, I call it, it's a Guenthner Duplicator 7. And the software it's running, it's called Nano DLP. If you look real close down here, if you guys can spot it, there's actually a Raspberry Pi computer that runs this printer right down here. And the way this printer works is basically you have this vat of resin, photosensitive resin at the UV light. It turns hard when it's exposed to UV light. The bottom of this tank is clear, and underneath here, there's literally a cell phone LCD screen and a UV projector lamp in the bottom of it. So basically it builds the part up basically a layer at a time by hardening the resin from an image on that screen. And we can go more detail in the questions if anybody has any more questions about that. So here's the 3D design of the side ribs, what we're shooting for. And here's how it came out of the printer. And the nice thing about these resin printers is that what determines how long it takes to print something is the height, the tallest part. You know, you can add 20 or 30 parts on that plate and it does not increase the printing time at all. Unfortunately here, if you look real close, my side ribs didn't exactly turn out straight, but this stuff is not fully cured yet and it's kind of flexible, so I was able to take care of that later. Here's another view. You can see all the rivet detail that came out. And what I was able to do to make these straighten out was I was able to sandwich them in between a piece of glass. And then I had this little UV flashlight, which is actually used in automotive work for finding, you know, leaks and stuff using UV dye. I was able to use it to harden the parts through the glass, and I was able to make them flat. These are little diagonal caps that go on the diagonal braces, and that's how they came out. Unfortunately, you know, the way these printers work, you don't always get what you want. These guys came out a little wavy, and this one up here is stuck to the bottom of the tank somewhere. It didn't make it out alive. The other parts I was going to throw that. Here's the design of the brake platform and how it came out of the printer. And here's those little gate wheel spacers. I was able to give them a little bit of rivet detail in the 3D printer as opposed to just a piece of blank styrene this way. Now to cure these other parts, I have actually a homemade UV cure station. This is literally a 1 gallon paint bucket with a continuous loop of UV LEDs at the bottom. And this little turntable in the bottom of it is actually run by, has solar panels on it. It doesn't have a battery, so it's run just as well as the UV light as we're off of a, you know, off a regular light bulb or sunlight. And this is kind of meant for the, you know, displaying jewelry and things in display cases, but it works just as well here to have it rotate around in front of all these LEDs. I built this thing off some instructions on, you know, somewhere on the web for like $20 or so. So now we go on to putting this thing together. So for the weight on the ones I'm going to do forward, I made these little triangles on my Cricut cutter. And if you put four of these guys on here, you make two nice cavities right here at the end to put weight in. So I filled those full of lead shot, number 9 lead shot, plus some tungsten powder to get a little more weight in there. And then I fill this whole cavity with Elmer's glue. And then I throw that in my light bulb oven, which gets up to about 110 degrees in there, and let that set overnight. And the glue all hardens and holds all those little lead shot in place so it didn't go falling out as soon as you flip it over. So then I needed to reduce the bolster height on all these cars. So I used my mill to do that. You can mill plastic. You just got to be, real careful and go slow. So I was able to take 0.060 off of that bolster very easy. So there's the before and after. Bring that height down, brings the coupler height also down to the correct height. Next step is we add the hopper gates. So I wasn't using their mechanism that all goes in these missing holes and things. So I just plugged the holes up in the gates with some styrene strip. Now's the time you need to tap for the screws for the trucks and the couplers, because in a minute you won't be able to do that. So I have started to bought a bunch of pin vices now. I made a big bulk order from one of the machine tool places. They were only $3 or $4 a piece, and keep all my standard drill bits that I use now already in a pin vise for speed. So my 256 tap's already ready to go, and then the tap drill for it's ready to go, and the clearance drill. So I just need to grab it and go, and don't have to worry about digging through drill bits and loading it in the pin vise now. So assembling the body, the top and bottom, there's a screw that goes in here, and then they're also glued together. This is why you had to tap the hole before you did that. So you've now covered up your holes and can't get the tap through there far enough to tap the threads all the way. It's also a lot easier to drill these holes in the side from the back before you put this together. But that's the basic car body. So next step is to start adding the ribs. So there's vertical ribs, and then there's these diagonals that go on, and then plus a couple of ribs at the end. There's with all the ribs in place. Got to be careful at this point because they're really vulnerable. You don't want to knock this over. Then we started adding the side extensions, which on this particular car, they're 0.060 by 0.25. I discovered after getting it together that I'd used the wrong size strip. That was supposed to be 0.040. So this car is a little narrower than I intended, but it still worked out. I'm cutting these side pieces long so that later I can trim them back. So should be a perfect flush fit. So then you got the extensions on the end. And you can see here now that all my ribs I designed so they'd be a little long, right? So they'd stick up. I wasn't exactly sure I'd be everything exactly even. And that allowed me to do was basically the next step would be to flip it over on a piece of glass and sandpaper on a piece of glass, and allowed me to bring all that so it's exactly the same level, because the next step is to add these top cords, which need to go on, this piece where everything was flush. So there's a couple pieces on the side, and then a piece across the end. Once again, I left the pieces long so I could go back with the file and some sandpaper and make sure everything was brought completely flush. The next step was, adding grab irons to the end. These are just standard Tichy O-scale 18-inch drop grabs. Then there's our brake platform. And it turns out that I didn't design this into it, but I ended up having to file a notch in it to fit over that grab iron there. Not a big deal, just took a few minutes to file that out. Then our steps, same steps as we'd used on the prototype car. Then these gate wheel spacers, there are 4 of them, 2 on each side. And here you can see where I was able to get some rivet detail into them now. Then couplers, it's just a standard KD 148 HO whisker coupler. And these trucks are actually Tichy HO scale 100-ton trucks with Intermountain 38-inch HO wheels, which scale out just a little over 20 inches in O scale. There are a little brake wheel ratchet and prowl, Grant line parts, and some Tichy wire. And then the gate wheels. So you can see that they're pretty plain, And then you just add a nut bolt washer caster to the end. That really seems to dress them up quite a bit. And this time I'm putting some pins in the back because I'm not going to install these till after I paint. So one of the things on the prototype, I realized it was going to be very hard to paint behind these wheels once they're installed on the car. So for the production models, I'm going to leave them off until I get the car painted, and then I'll glue them on afterwards. So there it is. There's the final production car finished, ready for paint. Got a little, little skinny O scale guy over here for scale again. So he, looks pretty good, pretty beefed up. Oops, almost lost a wheel on that one, it looks like. And then paint. Well, unfortunately, I have not been able to get to painting yet and weathering these cars up. I'll probably build one more before I paint the three of them together to see what they look like. I'm thinking for the period, probably either, a black, a weathered black, or maybe an oxide red. That seems to be the two most popular colors for most narrow gauge equipment, freight equipment. And that's it for me. So any questions, comments, or confusion or bewilderment?
Kevin, thank you.
Yeah.
I got to say, you're like visiting Mr. Wizard. You got more gadgets and toys than anybody I know. On to Mr. Thomas Guenthner. Go ahead and share your screen, Tom.
These are just a number of different updates that I've done on the layout since, I guess, probably back in March, in no particular order. I guess to start off with, I kind of ran out of real estate in the basement to add any more trackage or sidings for operations. And I had this sink, which I don't use a whole lot. And that seemed like the only logical place that I could add something at this particular time. So I played around with the idea of putting a little industry off of Appalachia over the sink. So as you can see, there was a sink with a bunch of junk on it. And here's where I started off. After I put the baseboard down, plywood, cork, and laid some track. This area up here was an old piece of scenery that I actually moved out of the garage layout, and it just set it there for appearance purposes at the time. This track that you can see goes behind the Dremel there, through that little hole, goes over to Carbon Yard through a closet. The other side goes around to Appalachia. Just a few shots as we went along. I ended up using a lot of block styrofoam and plaster impregnated cloth there to set the basis of the area. Right, if you notice this little area right in here, that would be part of it, and this back part then is removable so that I can get in there if I need access. So far, I haven't had to get in there. I assume it's going to work okay. There is one of the sidings for the Interstate Oil Company after the scenery was put up. The other area is this reliable warehouse storage and another warehouse over here. So we got two tracks servicing the warehouse area and a little off landing here for the road. There you can see where all three of those are. So when I finished up, I had to cover up the sink because it looked awful ugly. And obviously we're operating there, you might drop some stuff in the sink. So I created a removable top over the sink and painted it basic color as the cabinet. So that's called Rose Hill. The other thing that I've done, I had a makeshift sawmill that I had made out of hardboard, just as a prototype to see how it would look. I have that up there for a couple of years now, and being as I had some time, I decided to change it a little bit. So I made everything out of styrene and put some roofing material on it and kind of dressed it up. Ended up putting the sign over on top. I kind of like that. I found that on the internet somewhere. So there's the completed project, which only took a couple of days to finish. The other thing I did was worked on a Baxter station, Baxter Tire rather, and I had made this little movie to send to the L&N Historical Society to show them what I was doing. So I'm going to run that movie. Whoops. I said I was going to. I think that'll do it. Yeah, I know Ron's name spelled wrong. This just shows a little sequence of how I built the building. Added some lights inside and outside. I guess the hardest and most time consuming was putting all these shingles on the roof. Added some interior to it. And then got it sitting on a layout. There's a little guy inside. This is pictures of the prototype. And as it turned out, I got contacted with the publishing people, and they wanted me to submit some more pictures and narrative. So it got published in one of the latest L&N historical magazines. If you're a member of the L&N Historical Society, you probably have already seen it. The other little project I had is I had an old, I don't know, it was probably 30 years ago, barbershop and pool room that was made out of cardboard. And I still have that around. And the other day I got it out and I decided I'm going to my own barbershop and pool room. So I started out with some styrene putting this together. If you noticed, if you knew what I was talking about on the original, you'll probably recognize some of this. although I made the pool room a little larger in the back. And of course, I ordered, added some pool tables and pool people in there. I ran across the second set of figures, so I ended up making the pool room twice as big. And I added a second chair in the barbershop. Now, if you look it in from the outside, you can see the guy shooting pool. That'd be the back side of the building. There's the two barbers. And if you notice, I got LED lighting over top of the pool table, so I still need to add a light in the pool, in the barbershop in the front. I haven't done that yet, but there's the 8-ball pool hall and barbershop. The next thing, actually, this was the first thing I started in Appalachia. I had this board hinged on. I used it for a workbench for a long time. It would drop down, and I decided, well, I really need some more industry, so I'm going to set it up there and put some industry on it. So I ended up with five other tracks. And you see it's in the washroom. It's a little hard to get to the deep freeze and the dryer right now. But being as I do all the work, nobody's complaining. Of course, there's the great Ellison Concrete Company. I'm sure Ron appreciates that little ad.
The nicest
And then we have a
building.
coal company there for the BF Seward Coal and Construction Company. And as you can see, we got a concrete company. We got a tie rod with our tie assembly plant that starts at the sawmill, as you saw earlier, and ends up finding its way back to the tie yard after it goes through the Guenthner brothers tie staining outfit over on the other side of the layout. And that's my little presentation. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Tom. Anyway, we can go back, take another look at Ellison Concrete.
Yeah. How about that?
Nicest building on the layout.
Anyway, that's where I'm at, and I'm probably going to start getting down there and doing some more here as soon as the weather looks like the weather's getting cold today.
Thanks very much, Tom. If you want to quit sharing your screen now. Thanks, everybody. We had a nice turnout today, and we hope to see you back here, same place, next Saturday at 2 p.m.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, Tom, and Kevin. We appreciate it. All good stuff.
Larry Smith, good to see you.
Good to see you, Ron. Thanks for the invite. That's
You're welcome.
good. I like that.
Come again.
Okay, I hope so.